Welcome. My name is Chris Winter, and this is Sleep Unplugged. I've been thinking about and wanting to do a podcast about sleep for a very long time. A lot of people have said, you should do a podcast. It's fun to listen to you talk about sleep and relay your stories and experiences. But I thought, people will do it better. I don't know that I have the time for sort of the production and the slick value of the podcast. And I recently had a conversation with my wife and my daughter, and my daughter said, I'm listening to this podcast of this psychologist that I really like. He literally walks in the house, hangs up his car keys, lets his dogs out, sits down, and talks about what's on his mind. So I guess I've been sort of overcomplicating the whole process, and I'm actually really excited to share this podcast with you. I'm almost 50. I'm at the halfway point of a career that I'll tell you about in a minute. And I feel like I'm just running out of time to get the messages and the information about sleep out into the public the way I want to. So that's what the mission statement of Sleep Unplugged is. It's to share with you fantastic information, myths, stories, anything related to sleep. We're going to talk about it on here. We'll try to keep the episodes between 30 to 50 minutes, have some guests on from time to time. But I'm just really excited to share this podcast with you, and just really can't wait to get started because the ideas are aplenty. So let me talk to you about who I am. Again, my name is Dr. Chris Winter. I'm a neurologist and sleep specialist. And sleep specialist is an interesting term, particularly in 2022. I started working in sleep about 30 years ago, back in 1992, which is funny because my daughter, who I consider to be the producer of this podcast, said to me, Dad, you don't need the slick production value. You can do the podcast like this guy I listen to because he's got 30 years experience in the field. Those were the words she used. And I said, it's funny because as of 2022, we have reached the 30-year mark in terms of my experiences within sleep. And I'll share a little bit about it with you. So I grew up in Salem, Virginia, sort of a suburb of Roanoke, Virginia, kind of the southwest part of Virginia. And I guess at some point, probably around the third grade, I decided I wanted to be a doctor, although there is photo evidence that I'll put on my Twitter feed that perhaps the interest in medicine started even earlier than that. But, when you grow up where I did, when you mention wanting to be a pastry chef, there's not a lot of attention from your family. And in my family, both of my parents were the first in their families to go to college. They were both from West Virginia, sort of the Charleston area. And so when I would go to visit my family, and all my family were called Mama and Papa. I remember reading the book Hillbilly Elegy, and there was a chapter that said, if you refer to your grandparents as Mama and Papa, you are hill people. I remember that line very distinctly. So, but, all my grandparents were wonderful people. And I remember when I would say things like I wanted to be a doctor to them, they'd get real excited, maybe produce a, 50-cent piece and a piece of, hard candy or something. So there's always this kind of built-in reward system for wanting to become a doctor. So anyway, I was interested in the field. I remember a third grade teacher gave me a book about human anatomy, and she said, I'm going to call your parents to make sure that this is okay, because there were, pictures of male and female bodies in it, and sort of various anatomical poses. So she wanted to make sure I was okay with understanding what a cervix was before she handed me the book. And I remember getting the book and just being so fascinated by it. I love drawing pictures in it. I love memorizing the Latin names for muscles. I mean, same stuff that every kid who wants to be a doctor wants to do. I mean, you know nothing about being a doctor, just this sort of higher concept of it. And you like bones and the way the body fits together. And I love tracing the pathway of the blood through your heart. But anyway, so I went to medical, so I went to college. I went to the University of Virginia. And you sort of arrive there and you get there and there's all these people around you and everybody seems like they're just kind of on a path already, or at least it did to me. And so I was on this doctor path, but you know, what do you even start? What do you take? And, you know, so I went to my biology advisor. He was this guy named Rolf Benzinger. And he worked in the Department of Biology at the University of Virginia. And you were supposed to go and meet with him, and he would sit down with you and kind of guide you into what your field was going to be and what your plan would be. This guy looked like he was 100 years old, and I walked into his lab, which is where he wanted to meet me. And I'll never forget the first thing he said to me was something along the lines of, you know, if you ever commit a crime, wear denim, because denim is very difficult to get evidence and semen out of. That was the very first thing this guy said to me. I thought, oh God, I've got a loon for an advisor, and he was anything but. This guy was brilliant and caring and thoughtful and eccentric. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I think I want to be a doctor. He said, well, that's great. And so he gave me this big green binder and set it down right in front of me and said, you know, there's a bunch of doctors who want young undergraduate students to help them with their research. So you should look through there, because not only can you get valuable doctorate experience, but you can get biology credit hours, which sounded really good to me, because I was one of the few people, it seemed from my perception, that came to the University of Virginia with no credit hours. I mean, everybody from Northern Virginia and Richmond and different places, the DC area, Virginia Beach, they had all kinds of AP credits and things. And my school only offered 2 classes, and I'm not entirely sure why I never took the AP exam. Maybe it wasn't offered, or I don't remember. It was like AP Calculus and AP US History were the only 2 AP classes. And other people had, you know, every one of their classes seemed to be AP. So anyway, the credit hours seemed appealing. So I was looking through, and nothing was terribly appealing. You know, it was this sort of gel electrophoresis or fruit fly investigation of this thing, and even some of the more interesting topics, it didn't seem like I was going to be a particularly integral role in the research process. And then I turned the page and remember my eye catching the phrase breast implant and thought, well, this is interesting. And so as I was reading it, the research was talking about looking at breathing and sleep apnea in Yucatan micro pigs, and using breast implants, which were there were a bunch of them off the market, I guess, at the time. And they were going to put breast implants in the necks of thin pigs to give the thin pig sleep apnea. And I thought, well, that's fascinating. And I read on, and just the idea of sleep being something you could research. And so I called up the investigator, a guy named Paul Surratt, who happened to be the director of the University of Virginia Sleep Center. So, you know, not only am I working with a doctor, I'm working with a doctor whose field I've never even heard of before. I mean, I came to the university thinking I'd be a pediatrician or a surgeon or a dermatologist, because I heard they had pretty nice lifestyles. And so the whole idea of sleep was just crazy. So I ended up working for this guy for years, doing studies, and we'll pick an episode and talk about the Yucatan micropig studies. They are full of stories. In fact, we'll do a story on how you get a pig. Pigs are very smart. How you get a pig to wear a CPAP mask. We came up with an interesting way to do that. But anyway, so I did all this sleep research with these Yucatan micro pigs as an undergraduate. And when I graduated from the University of Virginia, I got into the Emory University School of Medicine and went down there and worked with those guys for a while. Don Blywise and Dave Rye, they ran the Emory Sleep Lab that I worked in, and worked with them for 4 years, came back to the University of Virginia for my neurology residency. So when I was down at Emory, I became really interested in neurology. The lab that they worked in was really a neuro-based sleep lab. Did some research for them, came back to the University of Virginia and did my residency. So I did an internship in internal medicine 1 year. And then the next 3 years, I was a neurology resident. So during my chief year, so your last year of your neurology residency, I and a guy named Mark were the chief residents, and during my chief year, I had a decision to make, and so I had decided to stay and sleep. You know, it's kind of at that point, I'm like, gosh, you know, it's 2003. I've been in this for 10 years now, you know, give or take, and I don't really want to leave it. I like sleep. I've made a lot of friends. In fact, Paul Surratt, the guy I first worked with, bought me a membership to the Sleep Research Society, and I still have that membership. And it was really important to me. I felt really excited to, you know, belong to this group as an undergrad. I didn't even know what a stethoscope was. You had to belong to the Sleep Research Society, which was fascinating. Got a few papers published about, you know, the sleep we did in these pigs, and it was just great. So I didn't want to let that go. And so I did a sleep fellowship at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And before I left for the fellowship, I got a call from a local physician who said, "Look, I'd love for you to join my neurology practice when you finish your fellowship, and I think you should be their sleep lab director." I was like, "Well, I didn't even know that the community hospital had a sleep lab." He said, "They don't, but you could put one together." I told this guy, I said, "Look, I don't know. I haven't even done my sleep fellowship yet. I've never put together a lab, let alone run it." And his words, to paraphrase them, were basically, I'll handle that." So I interviewed for the job of medical director of the sleep lab. And while I was doing that, kind of also told them, here's how I'd put it together. And the secret to putting a lab together is just copy all the labs that you've already worked in. You know, you just sort of, I remember at Chapel Hill, I was like, "How do you order a sleep study here at Chapel Hill?" And he's like, "Oh, they just fill out this form and you fill it in." I was like, "Could I see that form?" So, I mean, to this day, there are still elements of the forms we use at our sleep lab that are just blatantly plagiarized from Chapel Hill. I don't think that's breaking a law, but hopefully there's a statute of limitations there. But anyway, so I set up this lab and then did my fellowship down at Chapel Hill, and then moved back to Charlottesville for a third time to start working in this private neurology sleep clinic and separately run the sleep lab. That was in 2004. It is now 2022. I still work in that same clinic. It's gone through some changes and some specifications. I am no longer the medical director of that sleep lab, but it still exists. And I see adults and kids almost every day and help them with their sleep disorders. And that's where we are. So I gave a lecture one time and told the audience I was a sleep specialist. And when I was done, my wife had seen it. And she said, "You probably should have told them what a sleep specialist was." She said, "Because I got the impression from listening to people in the audience, they thought you were some sort of energy crystal healer," which I've got no axe to grind with energy crystal healers. Maybe I'll need their services one day. But she said, "You really need to let people know you are an MD, you're a doctor. And you have years and years of research and specialized training in sleep under some of the most brilliant sleep minds in the world." So that's it. We are nothing were it not for our mentors. And I've had some amazing mentors in those three places I told you, UVA, Emory, and in Chapel Hill. So that's where we are. And like I said, I'm approaching the age of 50. I think that I'm getting ready to head down the back nine of my career. And so I think this is kind of the perfect point to do something like this podcast where I'm, experienced and smart enough to put some episodes together, but also not on the other end where you just kind of rest on your laurels and think you know everything. The best thing about sleep is we are learning things about sleep at such a rapid rate. It's really difficult to keep up. And one of the things that really fascinated me about sleep when I first got into it, I'll never forget, I was walking down the hall and made a comment about, something, and Paul Surratt, this doctor, turned around and said, this is the best thing about sleep is that the question you just asked has not been answered. He said, there's lots and lots of questions about sleep that haven't been answered. And then he looked at me and he said, the heart, it's just a fucking pump. I'll never forget it. It's such a great line. Just a fucking pump. We got it. We understand it. We know it pretty well. So you can be a cardiologist if you want to, but there's not a lot of new things to see here. But sleep it's a real roller coaster. So that's me. So 4 days out of the week, we see adults and kids and deal with their sleep disorders. And I'm really excited to share some of their stories and triumphs and mysteries and conundrums that we've encountered. Obviously, we won't mention patient names or do anything that would allow you to identify them, but there's lots and lots of value in talking about these cases. And we're seeing them every day, and every day I'm confronted with something I haven't seen before. So I look forward to talking about that in this. And so that's the lion's share of what I do, I suppose. And that's what I truly love. It's seeing patients, helping to manage their sleep issues, helping to educate them and understand more about what they do. Additionally, many years ago, I did some research about sleep and how it affected the travel of Major League Baseball players. In fact, the origin of that research happened when I was first working with Paul Surratt. In fact, we were talking one day and he was talking about how travel affected, this and that. And I said, man, I bet travel affects sports. He said, yeah, it probably does. That would be a great study. And then he turned around and walked out of the room. Kind of like, that would be a great study, but I don't have the time or the interest in doing it right now. So it always kind of stuck in my head. And when I finished my fellowship and started working and had a little bit more control over my own time, I did a pilot study just looking at travel, how it affected Major League Baseball over one season. Presented it, and it got some attention, including Major League Baseball, who said, look, we'll fund you to look at that for 10 years. And what we found was that traveling and movement created its own advantages and disadvantages. And we'll talk about that during an episode of the show at some point. But when I presented it, it just happened to be picked up by a local news team in Colorado. And they said, a Virginia doctor has determined that Major League Baseball travel affects, did this little, Action News, Mac Johnson, Action News, Colorado kind of picked it up. But the unfortunate thing was they did this story about my research, but they never mentioned my name. And so the San Francisco Giants happened to be sitting in a hotel lobby, getting ready to get on a bus to go to the Coors Field. And somebody on the team saw this interview. Just happened to be playing in a TV in the lobby. And this guy, his name's Ben Potenzianzo, looked me up. He did some research and figured out who I was and gave me a call. So I was in clinic one day. He called me up and said, hey, my name is Ben. I work with the San Francisco Giants. We travel a lot. Your research is really interesting to me. Can we talk? And so long story short, I started working with the Giants. They won some World Series, and then we started working with a lot of teams. I always say we. My wife says, why do you always say we? It's you. you started working with teams? I always feel weird saying me. Like, sure. So I started working with a bunch of teams. So that's another aspect of what I do. So patient care to me is at the top of the pyramid. Work with a lot of professional sports organizations and athletes and help their clubs with sleep. And I see that as patient care. I mean, goalie for the United States women's soccer team at the end of the day is a patient who has specific sleep needs and performance needs. And that's really what fascinates me, is that intersection of sleep and performance. I'm not a huge athlete sports fan, but I love the idea of an athlete being the sort of laboratory. Let's fix his or her sleep. Let's improve it. Let's optimize it. And then we'll just kind of sit around and see what happens. Do they strike more people out? Do they run faster? So we'll do a bunch of episodes on sleep and performance. I find that to be just wildly fascinating and exciting. So that's another sort of segment of what I do. I've written 2 books. I love to write. Going through school, somebody asked me one time, if you could give pre-med students a piece of advice, what would it be? Because the advice I got going through was do well in math and science and take Latin. I guess because a lot of anatomical terms have a Latin root to them. In case I come across an organ I can't identify, I can maybe work its meaning out through Latin. I have no idea where this. So anyway, what I said to this individual was, if I could go back and give myself or give any pre-med student some advice, it would be get comfortable with public speaking and work on your writing. And the ironic thing is, my mother's an English teacher. And I remember distinctly thinking, oh, God, man, if only she were a chemistry teacher, that would be so helpful. Or an anatomy teacher. Oh, my God, if my mother were an anatomy teacher, that would have been so great. But, looking back, an English teacher is exactly what I needed. I spend so much time writing for media and things of that nature and trying to express myself clearly and in a way that's helpful to others. So I think that working on those skills are invaluable. We are nothing if we can't communicate. Anyway, so I've written 2 books. One is called The Sleep Solution: Why Your Sleep's Broken and How to Fix It. And we'll do episodes on that as well too. But that book was, a couple years ago. I thought, I've got a lot of ideas, kind of like with this podcast. I've got a lot of ideas about sleep I want to get out. And they're not ideas I see reflected in other writings and things of that nature. So I just opened up a Microsoft Word document and started writing and sitting in an airport, waiting for a flight, write, on the flight, write, waiting for my daughter to finish a ballet class. I just pop out the laptop and finish writing a little bit more on this topic I've chosen. And the file just got massive. One day, a guy called me up and said, I read something you wrote in a magazine. I think you should write a book. I said, oh, I did write a book. And he got real quiet and sort of shy. And he said, oh, gosh, I'm so sorry, Dr. Winter. I looked you up. I thought I'd done my homework, but I just didn't see that you had written a book. I said, oh, you would never have found it because it lives hidden on my laptop. And he said, well, can you send it to me? And so I sent it to him and he sold it. So that's how the Sleep Solution came about. And like I said, we'll talk about that later. I wanted to call that book Shut Up and Sleep, but nobody would let me do that, which really upset me. So anyway, the Sleep Solution was the title that we agreed upon. Still never been super thrilled with it, but I love the book. And I thought 10 people would buy copies, 8 of which would be bought by my mother. And it turned out to do really well, far exceeding my expectations of that book, which is exciting because I think it can help a lot of people who struggle with their sleep. But a funny thing happens when you're a doctor, or at least with me, and you write a book, I'm always sort of feel kind of icky telling people to buy it. Like if I'm working with a patient, it feels very, very wrong to say, And I think you should buy my book. It would really help you. But that's the whole purpose and the whole reason I wrote it. So anyway, so that was the first book I wrote. And then I had always wanted to write a book about kids and sleep. In fact, I talked to my editor about it, and her response was, "Really, another book about kids and sleep?" And I said to her, "Oh, really? What books are you referring to? Because there really aren't a lot of books about kids and sleep disorders." She said, "Oh, like Baby Wise and Dr. Spock and stuff." I said, "No. I said, those are books about how to get your baby to sleep through the night. God knows we'll cover that because I got a lot of things to say about that on this podcast." But I said, "I'm talking about a book that talks about sleep from the time your child is born till they head off and pledge a fraternity, and all the things that can go wrong with their sleep, and all the misdiagnoses and missed diagnoses and problems that people just don't see. I want to write about that because I think that not only are parents pretty uninformed about the sleep of their children, but so too are doctors and schools. I mean, I'm getting ready. I'm so excited. Tomorrow, I'm leaving for Atlanta because I'm giving a keynote to the National Association of School Nurses. And I'm get to talk to all the school nurses nationwide who are seeing these disorders of sleep in kids every day. So really excited about that. So through all that, the book, The Rested Child, Why Your Tired, Wired, or Irritable Child May Have a Sleep Disorder and How to Help came out. And it was published a few months ago. I'm really excited about it. I did not want to call it The Rested Child. I toured with a bunch of names. Arrested Development, which I thought was really cute. So imagine the word arrested in some color, but then the word rested within arrested is a different color. And people thought that's going to be too much like the TV show. And then the title I really, really, really wanted, because I wanted to capture the fact that this isn't just for babies. It's for kids of all ages, including moody teens that sit up in their room on their laptops and get mad when you come into their bedroom. I thought it would be a great book title would be Tired AF. And that got vetoed so hard by my agent and my publisher. They said, "Look, you're a doctor. You can't talk like that." So anyway, that book came out. Very excited about it. If you have kids, and I hope you'll check it out. So writing is another sort of aspect of what I do. And then sort of media. I work with a company called sleep.com that is really sort of dedicated to getting the message about good sleep out there. We're working on a sort of a show about people who sleep in unusual places. And I've done some podcast work through them with Vox but this is sort of my own project. Sleep Unplugged is mine, and I get to be the director and the producer and talk about what I want. So this will be the real unfiltered Dr. Winter. So just giving a sort of a preview of what you can sort of expect in the podcast. And I really hope that you'll reach out to me through my social media, Dr. Chris Winter on Instagram, Dr. Chris Winter on Twitter, Dr. Chris Winter on TikTok, if you really want to go there. Although one of my favorite TikTok videos on there, my daughter made, who is the one who really kicked me into doing this, which was I was filming an ad for Swanwick. I liked their glasses. I wasn't getting paid for it. I said, "Oh, I'll be happy to film a little endorsement for you." So I probably shouldn't say ad. And as I was filming it, the power went out. Power always goes out in my house. In fact, I can't believe I made it through 28 minutes of this recording. The power hasn't gone out. And I kind of lost it. And swearing a little bit and whatnot. And then I was like, all right, well, I'll turn on the generator. And so anyway, the video was rolling during that whole thing. My daughter thought that'd be hilarious to post. And I think to date, it's by far and away my most popular TikTok video, whatever that means. So anyway, I hope you guys will reach out and throw out there some topics that you want to discuss, things you want to hear about. Because I've got a million. Because I think sleep is an endless well of really interesting and topical and important things to discuss. Not just I can't get my baby to go to sleep and I can't get myself to go to sleep, but technology that's out there. I mean, the explosion of technology right now is absolutely incredible. I remember when I was doing research as an undergrad, I needed a piece of equipment to take home to do it. I was working with some pigs. I was going to take it home, do some stuff, take it to the place where the pigs were. So I had to take it out of the hospital. And Dr. Surratt Paul, he gave it to me. But before he let go of it, he said, Chris, be super, super careful with this because you do not have the money to replace this equipment. You know what that equipment was? It was a pulse oximeter. It was the size of like a laptop, and it had the little thing you stick on your finger by Nelcor. I'll never forget the producer with Nelcor. We can buy pulse oximeters now on Amazon for $15 that just clip on the end of your finger. I mean, it's just amazing, the technology explosion. I mean, I was doing sleep studies on these massive things called polysomnographic, equipment with pen and ink and paper everywhere. And all that information and all that technology can fit in a watch right now. So I think technology will be a lot of fun to talk about. I want to talk about patients. I want to talk about research that's coming out. I want to talk about my opinions of things within sleep and things that are sleep adjacent. So I'm really excited for this platform. I can't believe we've already gone 31 minutes here in episode 1. So I hope you will follow this. I don't think you'll be disappointed because I think that there's really nothing more we should be caring about than sleep. I mean, if you think about your health, I think of it as sort of a stool with 4 pillars. We eat, and the things that we put in our body, I think, are really important, and you can put hydration in there. We need to exercise our body. How are you training your body? Do you exercise? Does it sleep relate to that? And we'll do a lot about sleep and its relationship to exercise, both at a high performance level, but also at the level of you and me. I think there's also mindfulness, meditation, which I'm glad I'm doing this podcast now and not 20 years ago, because I really have come to understand a lot more about the relationship between meditation, mindfulness, and things of that nature, and sleep. Whereas I really in the past kind of saw them as being very separate things. But the older I get, the more important I think that is. It's like stretching. And I spent decades of my life in gyms, never stretched a muscle. And now, I think there's not a lot that's more important. In fact, I feel like the phases of exercise within one's life are lift a whole bunch of weights when you're young. Then you move into the triathlon Spartan race situation when you're kind of in the next phase. And then it becomes stretching, just getting your lower back to loosen up a little bit. So, and so there's the eating and the drinking, there's the exercise, the mindfulness, and then there's sleep. It's the 4th pillar. And you can make a stool with 3 legs. You could cut out one or skimp on one, but I've people have asked me, which of the 4 pillars do you think is most important? And I think it's probably sleep. I think it's the most important one, and it's the one we have a lot of control and power over, and it's the one that I feel like we're getting the worst information about. So hopefully we can clear that up on Sleep Unplugged with this podcast. So, like I said, somebody told me, and I remember medical school, we got 1-hour lecture on sleep. And when the lecturer was done, he said, it was really interesting. And he said, man, there's nothing better to talk about than sleep and sex. And that was the end of his lecture. And I agree with that. Sleep's great. I'm getting ready to do it in a few hours. Can't wait. And I hope that everybody listening to this feels the same way. So let me give you my social media handles again. They're Dr. Chris Winter on Twitter, Dr. Chris Winter on Instagram. So that's all lowercase Dr. ChrisWinter. I hope you all will reach out, give me some feedback, give me some topics you'd like to cover. Once again, I want to plug the sleep solution, why your sleep is broken and how to fix it, as well as the rested child, why your tired, wired, or irritable child may have a sleep disorder and how to help. They're available on Amazon, Kindle, wherever books are sold, Audible as well too. Please rate, review the podcast, and by all means, please subscribe so we can have a lot more fun doing these in the future. Until then, this is Dr. Chris Winter Thank you for visiting Sleep Unplugged. Sleep well tonight.